I am now thrilled, truly, to introduce Detective Bob Schilling. Detective Shilling recently retired from a 36-year career as a member of the Seattle Police Department, where he spent 26 of those years assigned to the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit. 18 of those years he served as the lead detective in the Sex and Kidnapping Offender Detail. Many of you are familiar with sex offender registration and notification policies that operate in our country by federal requirement. In 1993, ahead of the first federal registration and notification requirements, Detective Shilling recognized the need for thoughtful community notification policies that would meet the letter of notification policy law, but also counter the risks of violence and vigilantism towards people subjected to those laws. Empathy, as Kenny just mentioned. He developed a curriculum for doing public education meetings that was seen by many as a nationwide model, and he was tasked by the U.S. Department of Justice to train law enforcement agents on this public notification curriculum in over 20 states. He has also trained law enforcement agents on this curriculum in Australia, France, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Switzerland. In 2000, he was appointed by the Interpol Secretary General to the Interpol Specialist Group on Crimes Against Children. And in 2009, he was appointed as chair of the specialist group by the 190 Interpol member countries. In 2013, Detective Shilling moved to Interpol headquarters in Lyon, France, to serve for 3 years as the head of Crimes Against Children. By the end of his 3-year term, Detective Shilling's team and network of investigators had physically rescued 5,420 victims of sexual abuse, working from images in their database. This was more victims rescued in 3 years than in the combined 13 years prior to his arrival. I could go on, and I will for just one more minute. In 2014, Detective Shilling became the first law enforcement officer to receive the International Council of Jurists Award, presented in London by the President of the International Court and the former Prime Minister of Jordan. That award was for his lifetime achievements in protecting the rights of children. In 2015, Detective Shilling was honored at Facebook headquarters in Dublin, Ireland, with the Wired Cop Award for his achievements in protecting children online. And in 2017, Detective Shilling received the Distinguished Contribution Award from the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers, an organization for which I served as president, and I was so proud to see them give you this award for his notable contributions to the field of sexual abuse. Please join me in warmly welcoming Detective Bob Schilling.
Thank you very much, and good morning. 52 years ago, a young boy sat on the edge of his bed and contemplated suicide because of the horrible sexual abuse he was suffering at the hands of his grandfather. Days earlier, his mother had walked into the room while the abuse was occurring. And just as quickly as she entered, she backed out of the room and closed the door behind her. That was the lowest point in the young boy's life. All the boy wanted was someone to come and rescue him from this desperate situation that had gone on for 3 years. And now he knew even his mother couldn't do it. In the end, no one ever came to rescue him. But fortunately, the young boy did not follow through with suicide as the way out. As law enforcement officers working in child sexual abuse units, we are driven by thoughts of young children needing to be rescued from these types of situations. We work in units where we take horrific child abuse images and videos and try to identify who the child is and where they are located so we can rescue them. These images and videos, some of them with screams of pain from the child are never lost on us. You cannot unsee what you've seen. You cannot unhear what you've heard. This is one of the reasons why, as head of crimes against children for Interpol, I mandated that every employee working for me had to see a psychologist at least once every 3 months, paid for by Interpol. There was additional free counseling for them anytime they needed it. I also had a standing policy that if you have just reached that point to where you need a couple mental health days off, or you just want to get away and walk through the park across the street, please do so. You won't be docked for time. Most disturbing to all of us was the fact that approximately 20% of all images or videos we were obtaining through covert operations or infiltration of networks in the darknets was of the abuse of children who were infants and toddlers. Infants and toddlers. Images like this make you want to crawl through the computer monitor and not only rescue the child, but beat the perpetrator to within an inch of their life. Obviously, we can't do that, but it affects you to the core of your being emotionally. In 52 years, the way images and videos are produced has changed substantially. In the 1960s, sexual abuse was recorded via 35 millimeter cameras, Polaroids, or 8 millimeter motion picture film. These images or films were then shared with like-minded individuals by VHS tape, usually through the United States Postal Service or in packages described as something else. Today, finding like-minded individuals who are interested in child sexual abuse has become much easier because of the internet. Internet relay chat, use groups, and peer-to-peer networks have allowed people on one continent to quickly find and connect with individuals in their own and other continents. iPhones, other smartphones, DVDs, memory cards, and USB portable mass storage devices have made it increasingly easy for an individual to record child sexual abuse and then get it to another individual with little fear of being caught. Let's explore some of the reasons why offenders have little fear of getting caught. First, there are few law enforcement officers doing this job. I have spoken to some of the most seasoned, hardcore law enforcement officers in our discipline who have said, "I don't know how you can do that job. I sure couldn't do it." Many are parents, and some have been abused themselves. Some don't want to deal with any crime having to do with the abuse of children. It takes a toll on you. I have seen seasoned officers ask for a transfer because they just can't deal with the abuse anymore. Second, offenders do not have to play by the rules, and the police do. Law enforcement officers have to follow stringent procedural and evidentiary rules. Otherwise, cases will be thrown out of court. When that happens, the victim is once again victimized, only this time by the criminal justice system. Third, the lack of coordination is detrimental to law enforcement efforts to successfully investigate and apprehend producers, distributors, and consumers of child sexual abuse material. While in most countries there is a national police force that handles all criminal matters, in the United States we have 17,985 federal, state, municipal, tribal, and campus law enforcement agencies, all with criminal investigative powers. Politically, each jurisdiction wants the credit, because with credit comes recognition and funding. Therefore, law enforcement jurisdictions in the United States tend to keep things close to the vest and not share them with other law enforcement agencies. This is especially true with federal law enforcement. Fourth, if law enforcement is able to exploit a weakness or vulnerability through covert operations or infiltration of forums, criminals end up deploying countermeasures based on court proceedings, where law enforcement must describe to the court in painstaking detail how they exploited the vulnerability or infiltrated the forum. That testimony then spreads like wildfire, and the criminals know now what not to do. Fifth, over the years, technology has advanced at lightning speed, allowing a vast array of means for producing and sharing child abuse material. Law enforcement is always in catch-up mode. Constrained by budgets and the slow wheels of government, law enforcement often does not have the state-of-the-art tools necessary to do the job efficiently and effectively. Simply put, government just cannot move that quickly. Sixth, most child abuse material has moved from the surface web that we are all familiar with to the deep web or dark nets. Although often used interchangeably by the media, the deep web and dark nets are two distinct environments. While criminals operate extensively in both of these environments, neither should be considered exclusively criminal in nature. The deep web, or underweb as it's sometimes called, represents the vast volumes of World Wide Web resources that are not indexed by search engines. Much of the content is protected from indexing by site administrators. This protection from indexing could be as simple as requiring a password to log in, implementation of CAPTCHAs, or refusing connections from devices that don't have the correct digital certificate installed. The dark web, or darknet as it's commonly called, originally referred to a private peer-to-peer file sharing networks, especially those where connections are made only between trusted peers. It has grown to cover anonymizing networks, mixed networks, and cyberspaces such as the Onion Router or the Invisible Internet Project. Anonymizing and mixed networks are services designed to obfuscate the connection between network traffic and network addresses, making it harder for law enforcement and other observers to attribute activity to one specific device. In fact, they tend to go through multiple devices in multiple countries before you even see it. Over the past few years, the distribution of child abuse material has seen significant transition into the darknets. Unlike the deep web, where administrators have greater verification control over who has access to their sites, the darknets have a model of everyone is anonymous to everyone. Using covert operations or infiltration techniques, which I obviously can't talk about, law enforcement has been able to make some headway in identifying, apprehending, and prosecuting producers and distributors of child sexual abuse material. Establishment of Internet Crimes Against Children ICAC task forces in the United States has helped, as has the establishment of a 150-person national task force in the Netherlands to combat internet crimes against children. Additionally, the Netherlands created legislation supportive of law enforcement's efforts, and the Dutch police were able to hack into servers running hidden forums and sites in Tor and other darknet networks. The Dutch police would identify those accessing and contributing to the network, and then post the following warning on the site. The site is under criminal investigation by the Dutch National Police. You are not anonymous. We know who you are. The production, distribution, and possession of child pornography are serious crimes. And they had some success with that. Law enforcement in other countries have not been as successful as the Dutch in obtaining this kind of legislation due to privacy concerns. There is no way of knowing whether a server hosting the child abuse images, where it is physically located. So it's possible that a law enforcement agency carrying out such an attack is acting beyond its jurisdiction. In 2001, Interpol created the first centralized global database of images of child abuse, ICAID, while at the same time bringing together those member countries with national units dedicated to identifying victims through forensic examination of the images of abuse. It soon became apparent that a relational database that investigators could access directly from workstations in their own countries was urgently required. In 2009, Interpol established the International Child Sexual Exploitation Database, ICSA. Funded by the G8 and the European Union, the goal of the ICSA database was to make it easier for law enforcement to coordinate efforts to identify children in abuse images and to avoid duplication of efforts. The database was accessible by specially trained investigators from their own workstation in their own country. Because the internet is international, it was not uncommon for investigators in one country to be investigating a series of images where another country had already identified the victim, arrested the perpetrator, and prosecuted, and he was in prison. The duplication of efforts was a huge frustration and waste of time for law enforcement. The ICSA database solved that problem as long as investigators used it. It is very clear to law enforcement around the world that we are only scratching the surface. We are always 2 steps behind, playing by the rules, and unable to react quickly. In the meantime, there are millions of images of children being horribly sexually abused, and those images posted in the darknets. Law enforcement efforts can best be described as the carnival game whack-a-mole. We may discover and take down a network and rescue a number of children, but when we do, the perpetrators learn how to be better criminals from their mistakes, and they move their operation to another, better protected site. And they are constantly sharing information with each other. When we infiltrate some of these networks, this is some of the stuff that we end up seeing. The Gina producer did the same thing with an iPhone 5, and he's in jail now because it adds GPS coordinates by default. So do many other phones. Here's another one. Get rid of all things in a photo that can be identified. Change the position of items in a bedroom if needed. Clean carpets to get rid of evidence of furniture moved. And it goes on and on and on. They've got their own intelligence network. During my 3-year secondment as head of crimes against children for Interpol, as you heard from Elizabeth, my team and our international network of investigators identified and physically rescued 5,420 victims of sexual abuse from images or videos that were contained within the ICSA database. To those 5,420 victims, we were not spinning our wheels, and they felt lucky to be rescued. But I believe we can do better. We can do better if we keep sexual assault from happening in the first place. We need to tackle it like the preventable public health crisis that it is. We need to create an infrastructure where abusers, or those who feel they are headed down the road to abuse, can honestly disclose and receive multi-systemic treatment to help them without being publicly vilified. That treatment may include sexual deviancy, mental health, or drug and alcohol treatment, even for those who can't afford it. It's still cheaper in the long run. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We need to think outside the box. The goal is no more victims. The way forward is to be proactive instead of reactive. If we continue to be narrow-minded in our thinking and reactive in our responses, we will never solve the problem. We will, in fact, be spinning our wheels because we never move forward in solving this horrible crime and keeping our community members safe. There are some excellent prevention programs that we should be publicly funding and looking at evaluation outcomes. Programs like Stop It Now in the USA, UK, and Ireland. You'll be hearing more about Stop It Now later in the day, so I'm not going to discuss it further at this point. Then there's Prevention Project Dunkelfeld, led by Dr. Klaus Bayer in Germany. It's another excellent prevention program that we should be looking at. Prevention Project Dunkelfeld provides clinical and support services to individuals who are sexually attracted to children and want to help controlling their sexual urges, but are otherwise unknown to legal authorities. The term Dunkelfeld is German for the dark field. The project began in Berlin in June of 2005 with a large media campaign to contact pedophiles and ebophiles who wanted help from clinicians to manage their paraphilias. The campaign pledged medically confidential treatment free of charge. It was initially funded by the Volkswagen Foundation, and it has been financially supported by the German government since 2008. The project's slogan is, "You are not guilty because of your sexual desire, but you are responsible for your sexual behavior. There is help. Don't become an offender." And this is one of their public service ads that they do.
Schon früh habe ich gemerkt,
dass ich anders ticke. War schon klar,
wie man über solche wie mich denkt.
Krank.
Pervers. Abschaum.
Dachte ich ja auch.
Dabei habe ich meine Fantasie noch nie ausgelebt.
Durch die Therapie habe ich gelernt, niemand ist schuld an seiner sexuellen Neigung.
Aber jeder verantwortlich für sein Verhalten. Ich will kein Täter werden.
Präventive Therapie verhindert sexuellen Kindesmissbrauch. www.keintäterwerden.de.
And this played all over Germany, which was amazing. And they got a lot of response from it. I was fortunate to have Dr. Byers speak to the Interpol Specialist Group on Crimes Against Children, and his presentation was fascinating. I'm not going to tell you that all of the specialists in the room felt it was a good idea to treat a possible hands-on offender and not have them disclose who their victim or victims were, or have them not do time for their awful crime. It was a controversial presentation, to say the least, but it got these specialists thinking outside the box. Can we do better in protecting children from sexual abuse? Can we prevent it from happening in the first place? Is mandatory reporting keeping us from reaching and treating offenders before they act on their sexual attraction to children? Can this program be part of a plea agreement so that we can reach the victim and get them the services they need, while at the same time getting the offender the services that they need? Are we really spinning our wheels? Before we end, I would like you to take a look at this photo from what is now known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Few people knew the name of Captain Chesley B. Sully Sullenberger prior to January 15, 2009. It was on that date, however, that Captain Sullenberger faced an emergency of epic proportions. And as a result, his became one of the most recognized names in the world. Being a hero wasn't something Captain Sullenberger anticipated that day. Yet just after takeoff from New York's LaGuardia Airport, he collided with a flock of Canadian geese, which disabled his aircraft. At that moment in time, and with 155 souls aboard his aircraft, Captain Sullenberger used his extensive knowledge and training to successfully land his U.S. Airways aircraft on the Hudson River, saving everyone on board. While all pilots are trained for this type of incident, most water landings are not successful. Captain Sullenberger was subsequently quoted as saying, "We need to try to do the right thing every time, to perform at our best, because we never know which moment in our lives we will be judged on." I cannot agree more. In our jobs, whether it's investigations of child sexual abuse, research, social work, or advocacy, we owe it to the victims who are depending on us to do our jobs to the best of our ability, to bring them justice, to protect them from harm, and to rescue them from the end of the bed. We never know when that moment will come for us and how we'll be remembered. 52 years ago, a young boy sat on the edge of his bed and contemplated suicide because of the horrible sexual abuse he was suffering at the hands of his grandfather. Days earlier, his mother had walked into the room while the abuse was occurring, and just as quickly as she entered, she backed out of the room and closed the door behind her. That was the lowest point in the young boy's life. All the boy wanted was someone to come and rescue him from this desperate situation that had gone on for 3 years. And now he knew even his mother couldn't do it. In the end, no one ever came to rescue him, but fortunately, the young boy didn't follow through with the suicide as the way out, because that young boy was me. I used to tell my employees, we will not be able to rescue all of the children who need rescuing. There's just too many of them. But if you give 100% to rescuing those we can rescue, you'll be amazed at how many that will be. I want to thank Dr. Letourneau for this extraordinary opportunity, and thank you for listening.